I'm standing at my mother's funeral, watching everyone else read heartfelt letters she left behind, while I hold nothing in my hands. The silence around me feels deafening as person after person unfolds handwritten notes from my mom, their faces lighting up with bittersweet smiles through their tears. My sister Brooke, dressed in perfect black with her perfectly styled hair, looks directly at me with eyes full of hatred and says loud enough for everyone to hear, "You deserved nothing, Rachel, and you got it." The words hit me like a slap across the face, but before I can even process the humiliation, my Aunt Janet chimes in from across the room, shaking her head in disgust. "Even the dead know who to shame," she says, her voice dripping with judgment. "Maybe this should tell you something about yourself, Rachel." I want to disappear. I want to run out of this suffocating room filled with people who clearly think I'm some kind of monster. My face burns with embarrassment as I watch my own family members nod in agreement, as if my mother's decision to exclude me from her final letters somehow proves what they've all been thinking for years. But then something unexpected happens. My 10-year-old daughter, Emma, who's been sitting quietly beside me in her little black dress, tugs gently on my sleeve. She looks up at me with those big, serious eyes that remind me so much of my own when I was her age, and whispers something that makes my heart stop beating for a moment. "Mom," she says, her small voice barely audible above the murmur of family conversations. "Dad told me something important when he dropped me off today. He said Grandma Donna gave him a secret letter for you, but it was supposed to stay hidden from everyone else. He said she made him promise to give it to you only after all the other people read theirs first." My hands start trembling. A secret letter? From my mother? The same woman who apparently had thoughtful words for every person in this room, except for me? Emma continues in her innocent, matter-of-fact way. "Dad's waiting outside by his truck right now. He said Grandma told him you'd understand everything once you read what she really wanted to say to you." What I discovered in that hidden letter didn't just shock me to my core. It completely destroyed everything I thought I knew about my family, my divorce, and the 5 years of pain I'd been carrying around, like a weight on my chest. What my mother revealed in those pages changed everything, and when I walked back into that room with the truth in my hands, I watched my entire family fall apart right in front of me. That's me, Rachel Hayes, 35 years old, the family outcast who moved 4 hours away after a brutal divorce. My mother, Donna Hayes, was the beloved retired elementary school teacher who just passed away at 62, known for her thoughtful letters and careful attention to everyone she loved. My sister, Brooke Hayes. Martin is 32 years old, a nurse who stayed close to home and became the golden child after I left. My daughter, Emma, is my precious 10-year-old, the only person in that room who still looked at me with love instead of judgment. My ex-husband Tyler is a 38-year-old electrician who somehow ended up being trusted with my mother's final secret. My Aunt Janet Hayes is my father's sister-in-law, always ready with a cutting remark about my failures. And my father, Robert Bob Hayes, is my 65-year-old dad, a retired postal worker who was too grief-stricken to get involved in the family drama that day. Let me tell you how I became the black sheep of the Hayes family, because none of this makes sense without understanding where it all started. 5 years ago, I was living what I thought was a pretty normal life here in Millbrook, just 20 minutes from where I grew up. I had my marketing job at a local firm, my beautiful daughter Emma, who was only 5 then, and my husband Tyler, who worked as an electrician for the county. We lived in a cute little ranch house with a white picket fence, and I honestly thought we were happy. My mother Donna was the heart of our family back then. She'd retired from teaching 3rd grade after 30 years, and she spent her days volunteering at the library, tending her massive garden, and writing in those leather-bound journals she kept stacked on her kitchen counter. Mom had this thing about letters. She wrote thank you notes for everything, birthday cards that arrived exactly on time every year, and little encouraging notes that she'd slip into your purse when you weren't looking. She believed handwritten words had power, that they could heal hearts and bridge gaps that phone calls couldn't touch. Dad was always quieter, content to let Mom be the family communicator while he worked his postal route and came home to watch the evening news in his recliner. Bob Hayes was a man of few words, but when he spoke, we listened. He adored Mom, called her his Donna darling even after 40 years of marriage, and she'd blush like a teenager every single time. Brooke was the golden child even then. She'd married her high school sweetheart Kevin right after nursing school, had two beautiful kids by the time she was 28, and bought a house just 6 blocks from mom and dad. She was the daughter who showed up for Sunday dinners without being asked, who remembered to call mom every Tuesday night, and who somehow managed to balance her nursing shifts with being the perfect wife and mother. I loved my sister, but I'll admit there were times I felt like I was constantly being measured against her and coming up short. Then my world exploded in the most devastating way possible. I came home early from work one day in March, 5 years ago, planning to surprise Tyler with his favorite dinner. Instead, I found him in our bedroom with Brooke. Not just talking, not just having an innocent conversation. They were together in ways that sisters and husbands should never be together. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow, stealing my breath and making my legs give out underneath me. What happened next still haunts me. Instead of falling apart privately, instead of trying to work things out quietly between the three of us, everything became public family drama. Tyler moved out immediately, but Brooke ran straight to mom and dad with her version of events. She painted herself as the victim of my neglectful marriage, claimed that Tyler had been desperately unhappy for years, and somehow convinced our parents that I'd been a terrible wife who'd driven my husband into her arms. The family took sides, and I found myself outnumbered. Mom, who I'd always thought would support me no matter what, sat me down in her living room and delivered a speech I'll never forget. She told me that marriages don't just fall apart overnight, that I needed to take responsibility for my role in pushing Tyler away, and that maybe this was an opportunity for me to reflect on my priorities. She actually used the word selfish to describe how I'd been handling my career and motherhood. Dad didn't say much during those awful months, but his silence felt like agreement. When I'd call crying, he'd listen for a few minutes and then suggest I talk to mom about it. When I showed up at family gatherings, he'd give me awkward hugs and change the subject whenever I tried to explain my side of things. The divorce was brutal. Tyler fought me on custody, claiming I was unstable and vindictive. Brooke's husband, Kevin, who apparently had no idea about the affair, supported Tyler's character references because Brooke had convinced him that I was trying to destroy their family with lies. Even my own mother wrote a letter to the family court judge describing me as emotionally volatile and suggesting that Emma might benefit from spending more time with her father's stable support system. I felt like I was drowning in quicksand, sinking deeper every time I tried to defend myself. The harder I fought, the more they painted me as the crazy ex-wife who couldn't accept reality. So I did something that shocked everyone, including myself. I took a job offer in Springfield, 4 hours away, packed up Emma and our belongings, and left Millbrook behind. For 5 years, I've been rebuilding my life from scratch. I've had minimal contact with my family, showing up only for major holidays and keeping conversations surface level and polite. Emma spends summers and school breaks with Tyler, which means she maintains relationships with everyone I've lost. And my mother, the woman who once wrote me encouraging notes about following my dreams, became a stranger who sent birthday cards with generic messages and avoided real conversations whenever I called. That's the woman I was when I walked into Mom's funeral that day, carrying 5 years of hurt and confusion, still trying to understand how I'd become the villain in my own family's story. After the service ended and we'd all gathered back at Mom's house, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. There was a wooden box sitting on the dining room table, the same cherry wood box where Mom used to keep her special stationery. Dad was standing beside it with tears streaming down his face, carefully pulling out envelope after envelope, each one bearing a different person's name in Mom's distinctive handwriting. Donna spent the last 3 months of her life writing these, Dad announced to the room, his voice shaking with emotion. She wanted everyone to have something personal from her, something to remember her by. He started calling out names, and one by one, people stepped forward to receive their final gift from my mother. The first letter went to Dad, of course. His hands trembled as he opened it, and within seconds he was sobbing as he read about their 40 years together, how proud she was of the man he'd become, and how she'd love him even from heaven. Aunt Janet received a note thanking her for being the sister she'd never had, complete with inside jokes about their Christmas cookie competitions and shared memories of raising their children. Brooke's letter was 3 pages long, 3 full pages of Mom's careful cursive, praising her for being such a devoted daughter, for choosing nursing as a career that helped people heal, and for raising her children with such love and patience. Mom had written about how Brooke had been her greatest joy, her helper in the kitchen, her companion on shopping trips, and her comfort during Dad's heart surgery 2 years ago. Brooke read portions aloud through her tears, and everyone in the room smiled and nodded at Mom's beautiful words. Even Emma received a letter, a sweet note telling her how proud Grandma Donna was of her grades, her kindness to other children, and her artistic talents. Mom had included a small sketch she'd drawn of Emma's favorite butterfly, the monarch, with a note saying she'd think of Emma every time she saw one in Heaven's Garden. The letters kept coming. Mom's former teaching colleagues each received personalized notes about specific memories from their years working together. The mailman got a thank you letter for 23 years of reliable service and friendly conversation. Mrs. Patterson from next door received gratitude for all the times she'd helped with yard work and shared vegetables from her garden. Even the teenage boy who'd been mowing Mom's lawn for the past 2 summers had a letter waiting for him, encouraging him to keep working hard and save for college. I sat on the couch watching this beautiful display of my mother's thoughtfulness, feeling more and more invisible with each name that wasn't mine. The box grew emptier, but my hands remained empty. People started glancing at me with expressions I couldn't quite read. Some looked sympathetic, others looked uncomfortable, and a few looked almost satisfied, like they'd been waiting for this moment of public confirmation that I truly was the family outcast. When Dad reached the bottom of the box and announced that was everything, the silence in the room became deafening. Brooke was the first to break it, and she didn't hold back. She walked over to where I was sitting, her letter still clutched in her hand, and stood directly in front of me. "Well, Rachel," she said, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear, "I guess this settles any questions about where you stood with Mom." Her eyes were cold, harder than I'd ever seen them, even during our worst fights 5 years ago. "You deserved nothing and you got it. Even dying, Mom knew who was worth her time and who wasn't." The words hit me like physical blows, but before I could respond, Aunt Janet decided to pile on. She stood up from her chair across the room, shaking her head in that disappointed way she'd perfected over the years. "Even the dead know who to shame, Rachel," she said, her voice carrying that self-righteous tone that had always made me feel small. "Maybe this should be your wake-up call. Maybe you should finally understand what everyone else has known for years." Other family members started murmuring their agreement. I heard someone whisper that Mom had always been fair in her judgments. Another person said something about actions having consequences. My cousin Mark, who I'd barely spoken to in years, actually nodded approvingly at Aunt Janet's words. The humiliation was crushing. Here I was, 35 years old, sitting in my childhood home, being publicly shamed by my own family while my daughter watched from across the room. I wanted to defend myself, to scream that there had to be some mistake, that my mother couldn't have intentionally excluded only me from her final letters. But what could I say? The evidence was right there in front of everyone. Every single person in that room had received Mom's love in written form, except for me. I started gathering my purse and Emma's jacket, planning to leave before the humiliation got any worse. I couldn't take another minute of their satisfied faces, their knowing looks, their confirmation that I truly was the terrible person they'd all decided I was 5 years ago. But then Emma appeared beside me, tugging on my dress with an urgency that made me pause. Emma's small hand gripped my dress with surprising strength, and when I looked down at her, I could see something urgent in her eyes that made me pause, despite wanting to escape from this nightmare. She was looking around the room nervously, like she was afraid someone might overhear what she was about to tell me. "Mom, we need to go outside," she whispered, pulling me toward the front door. "Dad told me something really important when he dropped me off this morning, but he said I had to wait until after everyone else read their letters first." I was still reeling from the public humiliation, still feeling the sting of Brooke's words and the weight of everyone's judgmental stares. My first instinct was to tell Emma we'd talk in the car, that I just needed to get us both out of there before things got any worse. But something in her tone made me stop. Emma wasn't the kind of child who made things up or exaggerated for attention. When she said something was important, she meant it. "What did Dad tell you, sweetheart?" I asked, kneeling down to her level so we could talk more privately. Emma glanced back toward the living room where everyone was still discussing Mom's beautiful letters, then looked at me with those serious brown eyes that reminded me so much of Tyler. He said Grandma Donna gave him a letter for you, too, but it was supposed to be secret. She made him promise not to give it to you until after everyone else read theirs, and not in front of the family. My heart stopped beating for a moment. A secret letter? From Mom? The same woman who had apparently written thoughtful, loving messages for every single person in that house except me. "Are you sure about this, Emma?" I asked, searching her face for any sign that she might be confused or mistaken. "Dad really said Grandma gave him a letter specifically for me?" Emma nodded emphatically. "He's waiting outside by his truck right now. He looked really nervous when he told me, like he wasn't sure if he was doing the right thing. But he said Grandma made him promise, and that you'd understand everything once you read what she really wanted to say to you." I stood up slowly, my mind racing with questions and possibilities. Why would Mom give Tyler a secret letter for me? Why would she want it kept hidden from the family? And why would she trust my ex-husband, the man who'd betrayed our marriage, with something so important? Through the front window, I could see Tyler's red pickup truck parked at the curb. He was leaning against the driver's side door, checking his phone, but I could tell from his body language that he was waiting for something. Even from this distance, I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he kept glancing toward the house like he was expecting someone to come outside. Emma tugged on my hand again. "Mom, he said Grandma told him the timing had to be exactly right. She said you needed to read it after you saw what everyone else got, so you'd understand why she did things this way." My hands were starting to shake. Part of me was terrified to hope that there might be something more, some explanation for why I'd been left out of Mom's final farewell. The other part of me was angry that even in death, my mother was playing games, keeping secrets, and involving Tyler in family business that should have been between us. But I couldn't ignore the possibility that Emma was telling the truth. If there really was a letter, if Mom had really left me something but wanted it kept private, then I needed to know what it said. I needed to understand why she'd put me through this public humiliation if there was more to the story. "Okay," I told Emma, taking her hand. "Let's go talk to Dad." We walked outside together, and I felt the cool afternoon air hit my flushed face as we approached Tyler's truck. He straightened up when he saw us coming, and I could see something in his expression that I hadn't seen in years. It wasn't guilt exactly, but it was close. He looked like a man carrying a burden he wasn't sure how to handle. "Rachel," he said quietly as we got closer. "Emma told you?" "She said you have something for me from Mom," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady despite the emotions churning in my chest. "Is that true?" Tyler reached into his truck's cab and pulled out a manila envelope. My name was written across the front in Mom's handwriting, but underneath it were the words, "Private, to be read alone," in capital letters, underlined twice. "She called me 2 weeks before she died," Tyler said, holding the envelope but not yet handing it over. "She asked me to come to the house when no one else was there. She gave me this and made me swear I'd only give it to you after the funeral, away from everyone else. She said you'd understand why when you read it." I stared at the envelope, my heart pounding so hard I was sure both Tyler and Emma could hear it. "Did she tell you what's in it?" Tyler shook his head. "She just said it was something she owed you, something she should have told you years ago. Rachel, she made me promise on Emma's life that I'd get this to you exactly when and how she wanted. I've been carrying it around for 2 weeks, scared I'd lose it or forget." I reached out with trembling hands and took the envelope. It felt heavier than it should have, weighted with secrets and possibilities I couldn't even imagine. Whatever was inside had been important enough for Mom to trust Tyler with it, important enough to keep hidden from the rest of the family, and important enough to orchestrate this entire complicated delivery system. "Should I read it now?" I asked, looking between Tyler and Emma. "That's up to you," Tyler said softly. "But Rachel, whatever's in there, I think it's going to change things." I tore open the envelope with shaking hands, my heart hammering against my ribs as I unfolded 3 pages of Mom's careful handwriting. Tyler and Emma stood quietly beside me, giving me space but staying close enough to offer support if I needed it. The first line made my knees buckle and I had to lean against Tyler's truck to keep from falling. My dearest Rachel, if you're reading this, then I've kept my promise to protect you one last time, even though it cost us both everything. I read that sentence 3 times before I could process what it meant. Protect me? From what? I forced myself to continue reading, even though my hands were trembling so badly I could barely hold the pages steady. I need to tell you the truth about your divorce, about why I sided against you when you needed me most, and about the secret I've been carrying for 5 years. Rachel, honey, I know you think I believed you were a bad wife, that I thought you deserved what happened with Tyler and Brooke, but that's not true. I knew the real story all along. My breath caught in my throat. The real story. What was she talking about? 3 days after you found Tyler and Brooke together, Brooke came to me in tears. But she wasn't crying because she felt guilty about the affair. She was crying because she was pregnant, Rachel. She was carrying Tyler's baby, and she was terrified that if you fought the divorce or tried to expose what really happened, it would destroy her marriage to Kevin and tear apart her children's lives. The words hit me like a physical blow. Pregnant? Brooke had been pregnant with Tyler's child? I had to read that paragraph again to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. Brooke begged me to convince you to let Tyler go quietly. She said she'd already lost the baby in a miscarriage, but Kevin didn't know any of it had happened. She was desperate to keep her family together, and she was willing to let you take all the blame for the divorce if it meant protecting her secret. I felt like I was going to be sick. All this time, all these years of thinking I was crazy, of wondering if maybe I really had been a terrible wife. And Mom had known the truth. She'd known that Brooke was the one who'd been having the affair long before I discovered it. She'd known that my sister had been pregnant with my husband's baby. I made the hardest decision of my life, Rachel. I chose to protect Brooke's children and her marriage, even though it meant sacrificing my relationship with you. I let everyone believe you were the problem because the alternative would have destroyed too many innocent lives. Kevin's kids would have lost their stable home. Brooke's reputation as a nurse would have been ruined. And Tyler was already lost to both of you by then. Tears were streaming down my face now, but I couldn't stop reading. I needed to know everything. But Rachel, I want you to know that not a single day has passed in these 5 years when I haven't regretted that choice. I've watched you rebuild your life from scratch, seen you become stronger and more independent than you ever were before, and I've been so proud of the woman you've become. You think I abandoned you, but I've been watching over you the whole time. The next paragraph made me gasp out loud. That scholarship fund that's been helping with Emma's private school tuition, that was me. I set up a fake foundation and have been sending you money every month for 3 years. The anonymous donation that paid for your car repairs last winter, that was me too. I couldn't support you publicly without Brooke finding out and exposing everything. But I could help you quietly. My legs gave out completely, and I slid down the side of Tyler's truck until I was sitting on the curb. Tyler crouched down beside me, his face pale with shock as he realized what I was reading. There's more, honey. I've been battling pancreatic cancer for 8 months. The family doesn't know because I didn't want them hovering over me with pity. But my time is running out, and I can't take this secret to my grave. You deserved better from all of us, especially from me. The final page contained the biggest bombshell of all. I'm leaving you the house and half of everything in my will. Brooke doesn't know yet, and the reading isn't scheduled until next week. I wanted you to understand why before the family finds out about the inheritance. This isn't guilt money, Rachel. This is me trying to give you what you should have had all along. A mother's love and support. The letter ended with words that broke my heart completely. I saved every card you sent, every picture of Emma, every update about your new life. I have them all in a box in my closet, along with letters I wrote to you but never sent. I love you, my brave girl. I always have. Please forgive a dying woman for choosing wrong when it mattered most. Love always, Mom. I sat there on the curb, holding those 3 pages, finally understanding that the mother I'd thought had abandoned me had actually been protecting me the only way she knew how. She'd sacrificed our relationship to keep a family secret that would have destroyed multiple lives, but she'd never stopped loving me. Tyler was reading over my shoulder now, his face growing more shocked with each revelation. When he finished, He looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. "Rachel," he whispered, "I had no idea about any of this. The pregnancy, the miscarriage, none of it. Brooke never told me." But I was already standing up, already folding the letter carefully and putting it back in the envelope. Because now I understood exactly what I needed to do. I walked back into that house carrying Mom's letter like a weapon, but also like a shield. The conversation stopped the moment I appeared in the doorway, and I could feel every pair of eyes in the room focusing on me. Brooke was still holding her 3-page letter from Mom, showing it off to our cousins and basking in the glow of being the perfect daughter. Dad was sitting in his recliner, clutching his letter and wiping tears from his eyes. Aunt Janet was holding court near the kitchen, probably still discussing my public humiliation and how it proved everything she'd always thought about me. I walked straight to the coffee table and placed Mom's envelope right in the center, next to the empty wooden box that had held everyone else's letters. The room went completely silent. "Well," I said, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions raging inside me, "it turns out Mom did leave me something after all." Brooke's face immediately shifted from smug satisfaction to curiosity, then to something that looked almost like panic. "What do you mean?" she asked, standing up from the couch where she'd been displaying her letter. "Dad went through everything. There was nothing else in the box." I looked directly at my sister, this woman who had destroyed my marriage and then let me take the blame for 5 years, and smiled. "Did you really think Mom would take your secrets to the grave forever, Brooke?" The color drained from Brooke's face so quickly, I thought she might faint. She started shaking her head, her mouth opening and closing like she wanted to speak but couldn't find words. Everyone else in the room was looking between us, confused and sensing drama, but not understanding what was happening. "I don't know what you're talking about," Brooke stammered, but her voice was weak and unconvincing. "What secrets?" "Rachel, you're being dramatic again." "Am I?" I picked up the letter and held it where everyone could see Mom's handwriting. "She told me everything, Brooke. About you and Tyler, about the pregnancy you never mentioned to anyone, about how you begged her to convince me to let Tyler go quietly so your affair wouldn't destroy your marriage to Kevin." The room erupted. Kevin, who had been standing quietly by the window, spun around with a look of complete shock on his face. "What pregnancy?" he demanded, staring at his wife. "What affair? Brooke, what is she talking about?" Dad struggled to his feet from his recliner, confusion written all over his face. "Rachel, honey, what are you saying? What letter?" ? But I wasn't done. 5 years of pain and humiliation were pouring out of me, and I couldn't stop now. "Mom knew the truth the whole time, Dad. She knew that Brooke had been sleeping with Tyler for months before I caught them. She knew that Brooke got pregnant with Tyler's baby and then miscarried, and she chose to protect Brooke's secret by letting everyone think I was the terrible wife who drove my husband away." Aunt Janet was shaking her head in disbelief. "That's impossible. Brooke would never do something like that. Rachel, you're making this up because you're angry about not getting a letter." "Ask Tyler," I said simply. "He's right outside. He's the one Mom trusted with this letter, because she knew he was the only person who could confirm everything she wrote." As if on cue, Tyler appeared in the doorway with Emma beside him. His face was pale and serious, and when Kevin looked at him with desperate eyes, Tyler nodded slowly. "It's true," Tyler said quietly. "All of it. The affair, the pregnancy, everything Rachel just said. I never knew about the pregnancy until today, but the rest of it happened exactly like she said." Kevin's world shattered in that moment. I watched this man who had always been kind to me, who had supported Brooke through nursing school and raised their children with love and patience, crumble as he realized his wife had been lying to him for 5 years. He turned to Brooke with tears in his eyes and asked, "How could you let Rachel take the blame? How could you let her whole family turn against her when you were the one who destroyed her marriage?" Brooke finally broke down completely. She collapsed onto the couch, sobbing and trying to explain herself, but the damage was done. The family that had spent 5 years treating me like the villain now had to face the truth about their golden child. Dad walked over to me with tears streaming down his face and pulled me into the tightest hug he'd given me since I was little. "Rachel, honey, I'm so sorry. We were so wrong. Can you ever forgive us?" But here's the thing that surprised everyone in that room, including myself. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want to watch Brooke's marriage fall apart or see her suffer the way I had suffered. What I wanted was something much simpler and much more powerful. I wanted my family back. Over the next few weeks, as the truth settled and the family started to heal, I made some decisions that shocked everyone. I used Mom's inheritance not to move away permanently, but to buy a house just 2 towns over from Millbrook. Close enough for Emma to maintain relationships with her father and grandparents, but far enough for me to keep my independence and the new life I'd built. Kevin and Brooke divorced, but they worked out a custody arrangement that kept their children stable and loved. Tyler and I didn't get back together. We'd both grown too much in different directions for that, but we became better co-parents than we'd ever been when we were married. Most importantly, I learned that sometimes the people we think have hurt us the most are actually protecting us in ways we can't understand. Mom's final letter didn't just reveal family secrets, it revealed a love that was complicated and imperfect, but ultimately real. She chose to sacrifice our relationship to protect others, and while I don't agree with that choice, I finally understand it. The strongest lesson I learned is that truth has its own timing. Mom knew that 5 years ago, I wasn't strong enough to handle the full reality of what had happened. But the woman who read that letter at her funeral, the woman who had rebuilt her life from scratch and learned to stand on her own, she was strong enough to use that truth to heal instead of destroy. If this story touched your heart or made you think about the complicated nature of family love, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. Leave a comment below telling me about a time when you discovered the truth was more complicated than you thought. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more real stories about family, forgiveness, and finding your way back to love.